Hello, everybody. Welcome to our RV Lifestyle and Repair Club Live. We are Wednesday night. No, or Thursday night. I missed a day there. We're Thursday night. We just did our gold a little bit ago. I'm Dave Solberg. I'm your managing editor. And I see we have 28 viewers on, but nobody has posted a question yet. And one of the things I would also like to do when you post a question, make sure you put where you're from. And even if you don't have a question, tell me what kind of a rig you got, where you're from, is it in storage right now or not? So the goal that we just did, we talked about de-winterizing, and that's something that most of us here in the northern Iowa frigid cold with the groundhog that size shadow, 6 more weeks of winter. I think there's probably 6 more months of winter here. We're wishful thinking that we could de-winterize, but that is one of the things that at some point in time you guys will start to do. We've got a couple new products that have come up that I would like to tell you about until we get a question here. And one of them is, I get a lot of questions from people that own diesel pushers about the diesel exhaust fluid. As of 2010, the government required all diesel manufacturers to inject what's called DEF, diesel exhaust fluid. So when your exhaust comes through, the fumes come through, it literally hits this with a liquid that is supposed to help with the emissions. And the main ingredient in that is urea. And so we did some research. Somebody asked me, is there a shelf life on diesel exhaust fluid? And there is. There's a 1-year shelf life. According to there's a whole bunch of manufacturers that use them, but the biggest thing is to not let them be exposed to the sun. So you go into these fueling stations and these quick convenience store places, and you see them sitting out blazing in the sun, and how long have they been there? And so how do you tell if they're good? And one of the questions came in that says, well, I have a diesel pusher or even a diesel truck, and I don't use the whole tank in a year, so I put it in storage and it sits. 1 year later, is it still good? And so this is a tool that's called a refractometer, and it's just a portable little one that basically senses sugar content. And it's the same thing used in winemaking, I guess in beer, brewing as well. And you just take and pull a little of the diesel exhaust fluid. If you've got the bigger one, you're going to have to get a longer one down in here. Simply put a little bit on the plate here, and then just look, and it's hard to tell, but inside there is a little gauge that tells you the strength and weakness of that urea that's in this. And if it's if it's low, then you're going to either have to try and get it out and put some new ones in, or what I tell people is, when you store your rig, don't fill the diesel exhaust fluid up. Try to manage it, keep it at about a half, because even if that goes weak, if you put a half a tank of new DEF fluid in it, it will strengthen that enough so you can use it. Because the problem is if you've got the DEF that's gotten weak and it sprays onto that exhaust coming in, those NOx sensors, it's not going to condition it enough. Those NOx sensors are going to feel that you're not using any, and it will give you a check engine and a DEF code. And then you got about 6 starts, and then you go into limp mode, they call it, which is basically a towing mode. So I got this on Amazon. You can get it through Napa Auto Parts, a variety of different places. So if you got a diesel system that uses the DEF, the diesel exhaust fluid, then I would highly recommend looking at something like that. Okay, so we got Robert Smithing. What is the best grease for wheel bearings on a 12,000-pound fifth wheel? And generally what I do is, once a year, every 12,000 miles, you should check those bearings, re-grease them, depending on the type of bearing that you have. And I can't remember the brand, but I use Napa, has a bearing grease that is the kind of reddish, and it's rated up to a certain degree in it. So I guess I can't even think of the actual stuff. I just know I go in, I say I want the best bearing grease that you have, and now I see it, and I just, it's on the shelf and replenish it. One of the things, and I'm glad you brought that up, is I am going to grab this. There we go. Something that I think is important if you have a travel trailer, is get one of these infrared thermometers, and I think it's a non-contact infrared. You can get them at Ace, Home Depot, Harbor Freight, just about anywhere that sells electronic and measuring equipment, and various different degrees of it. But what I do with this one is, let's say, for example, here, and I think you can see the red on the back side there, 62.6 degrees in there. And what I do with this, I ran a company that we had 3 trucks and trailers that would put about 100,000 miles on. And so the challenge is that, you know, every 12,000 miles, do you need to repack those bearings in there? And sometimes it was more, or it was, you know, sooner than that. And we had a lot of bearing failures. We had a lot of axles, even tires, all this kind of stuff that first 6 months. So I started making the guys carry one of these, and they would, every time they stopped for fuel, they would give me the ambient temperature. I had a chart there, and they would put the ambient temperature that was on the sidewall of the trailer. Then they would hit the hub, and they would hit the brake drum, and hit the tire. And you can tell a lot about what's happening in that whole axle assembly just by the temperature that's going on in there. You know, if it's 70 degrees out, it's not uncommon for it to be 85 to 90 degrees on that bearing and the drum. But when it spikes up into 120, 130, or even higher than that, then you know that the bearings are getting dry. You know that maybe the brake, auxiliary brake, set up a little hot, and so it's a really good product to put in your toolbox and have that working. So Nancy says, I lost reverse on my 1995 32-foot Fleetwood Bounder. What would you do? I hate to say this, but I'd go forward. I'm just so pretty much what you're looking at. There may be a link mechanism. Since it's a 95, it could either be a Ford. I'm assuming on the Bounder 32-foot, it's a gas chassis. So you could either have the workhorse chassis with the Chevrolet engine and their transmission, or you could have the Ford F53 that would have the Hydra, I can't even remember the name of it back then, but the Ford transmission in it. So basically there could be a linkage that's doing it, but most of the time when you lose a reverse on that, it's in your converter. I'm trying to think of the name. I just had another brain fart in it, but there you have a converter that literally moves that back to a different gear, and you're talking about pretty much a transmission rebuild at that point. So it's not an easy fix. So sorry for the bad news. What is the best product to use for filling small holes in the bottom of my RV? Just small holes left during the manufacturing process. So Robert, I think what you're looking at when you're saying at the bottom of the RV is that if you look underneath, travel trailers will have a kind of a corrugated plastic cover. So they've got their frame rails, of their foundation, and they've got tanks hanging under there and all kind of stuff. And then they will have like a black corrugated underbelly that protects that. Most of your motorhomes are going to have kind of an insulated type of a product under it. So anywhere you've got holes drilled that low point drain hoses come through, or electrical wires or anything like that, a lot of times they'll go in and it seems like they route out a 4-inch hole to put a 1-inch hose in it. So what I've always used is just the spray in the, you can get a semi-expandable spray foam with that stuff, and then paint it. You'll see that a lot of times too when you look underneath. A lot of these motorhomes are open up a compartment. You'll see the black. It looks like a volcano erupting. That's a little bit overkill in my opinion. But check out on our site. We do have a video on the how to kind of mouse proof or rodent proof your rig, and I crawl underneath with that stuff, and we check all those little splices, because a mouse can get in a hole the size smaller than a dime even. So that's between that and insulating, I would use that expandable foam, but not the really full expansion one, just a very limited one, because you don't want it pushing things out and away from it. And then you can go in and what I would do is typically just kind of cut off the excess and then paint it so it looks a lot better than a volcanic eruption in there. So Tom S says, I have a leak from the corner of my skylight in my 2010 Winnebago Aspect 30C. The dealer resealed all around it on the roof, but it still leaks. So if your skylight, and that would, more than likely, I would think you're talking about the skylight that's in the bathroom. So I don't know on that Aspect if there's any other type of a skylight somewhere else. And, I mean, the first thing I would do is if I paid the dealership to reseal it and it's still leaking, I would take it back to the dealership. They didn't do a proper job. And a lot of times what happens is where you see the actual leak, that is not inside. That is not where it's coming from on the outside. It's traveling somewhere along a hollow tubing for framework or something, or migrating from somewhere else. And, the thing that I typically look at, if it's a skylight like that and you're having problems more often, I would take that skylight off, get all the caulking out around it, take out all the stuff and get the unit off of there to see what's actually happening. Is it coming from the actual side of the rig, roof to sidewall joint, and migrating through, a cross member piece of framework that's in there? So obviously what they're trying to do is, just do a quick seal on the rim of that skylight and it's done. And obviously that didn't work. So, and it's 2010, so it would not have been under warranty. But the other thing that you could do, and what I think is the best, is take it to a dealer that has a thing that's called Schwintech. And Schwintech is a device where it's a huge blower motor that sits inside the RV with a tube that goes up to a skylight, a vent, and it draws air in and it pressurizes the inside of that RV. And then they go outside with a water and soap solution, just like finding a leak in a tire. You pump up that hand sprayer and you spray that rig, and you will see bubbling anywhere that you've got a leak. So it may start here, but it leaks over here. And I've seen some people have taken them back 5 or 6 times, because when it's parked in your driveway like this, it leaks from the front cap, but it leaks inside in the back cap. And so they take it to the dealership where it's sitting flat, and the dealership takes a bunch of water and goes over the top of it. That's the old archaic way of doing things. And then, they seal the heck out of the back of it, saying, well, we can't find it, but we're going to seal it up. You take it home and it leaks again. So Schwintech is the name of that product. And you might want to find a dealer that has that, if this guy can't, get it back in and do it the right way. Robert, again, okay, what's the best part? Someone mentioned to me about a positive lock for the RV sliders. Can you explain what this is? So normally what a positive lock is, when you're going down the road, it's not uncommon for those slide rooms to just start to creep out a little bit. I've seen them go 2-3 inches, sometimes even further. And hydraulic ones are notorious for it, because the seal is supposed to keep the fluid from backflowing in, and some of them get a little weak and it starts to move out, and people panic because they think their slide room's going to fly out. So a positive lock is basically a bar, and there's a variety of different ones. I know Winnebago first came out in 1997, and they had a floor lock. So they, right on the floor, they had 2 what we call D-rings that were fastened to the floor. And when you brought the slide room in, you had this little handle with a hook, and you boonk, and so that unit would not go in and out. Well, now you got these 2 D-loops sitting in the floor, and especially if you have vinyl floor, wood floor, you don't want that sitting in there. So another type of positive lock is that when the slide room's in all the way, you have this bar that's adjustable that goes up on the top. I've seen some that go on the sides, that you run it out and then you hit the handle, and it just basically is a bar that wedges between inside. You see that a lot on some trucks, cargo bars that go across and things like that. You know, I've even had people in a pinch where they've had a slide room that they had to disconnect and bring it back in that used a 2x4, just wedged the 2x4 in between the wall and the flange of the slide room when it's retracted in there, and that'll keep it from moving out since they disconnected it from the motors. But that's what a positive lock typically is. So Steve Harkin, rear side window slide up, have lost the pin in the catch to hold up the window. Do I have to replace the window, or can you purchase and repair the latch? It's 2015 Keystone Copper Canyon. He's pulling it with a Ford F-350 long bed. So most of the windows that Keystone has used over the years, and I'm not positive in 2015, but I still think they were using Hair windows back then, H-E-H-R. Hurd is another brand that some manufacturers were using, but Hair is still in business. They're still manufacturing those. So I would go to their website and check with them to see if that, and you should be able to look on the window itself. There should be down in the lower right-hand corner a little red label, Hair, in there. I doubt if it's a Lippert because Lippert wasn't that predominant back then in the products that they are today. I know they have a whole host of windows and doors and things like that. Lippert might have something that's very similar that you could get a part for, but most of those you can get hardware for that stuff that you should be able to do it. The other thing you might want to look at is a salvage yard. There's about 5 or 6 RV salvage yards around the country that are parting out a whole bunch of stuff that's out there that, 2015, they probably used that window, I would say, several years prior to that. So just do a Google search for RV salvage yards and see if you can find something like that. The other possibility is get a hold of Keystone and just find out, most of Keystone didn't manufacture much of anything that they assembled in their rigs. So they don't have a lot of stuff, but they may be able to guide you to what they did use. So we've got Angel says she's got a 2002 Born Free Class C, needs to purchase 2 new batteries. I've been trying to decide between 2 6-volt in series or 2 12 volts in parallel. And Born Free was actually manufactured about 45 minutes from here in a town called Fort Dodge, Iowa for years. And I don't believe they are in business anymore, but great little unit, little Class C. So the best battery for you really depends on how much dry camping you're going to do and how many appliances, 12-volt components that you're going to use in it. So the difference between a 6-volt and a 12-volt battery, and I think we've got, Angie, if you want to just pan down here in the front, you'll see that we have 2 Trojan 6-volt batteries here. And you can tell by the way they only have 3 of the ports on the top. You'll have 6 on this 12-volt deep cycle over here. And so what you have to do with these batteries is you have to have 2 batteries hooked in series, it's called. And so what that means, and you did put that 6-volt hooked in series, so you still need a 12-volt bank. So you take this 2 6s and you hook positive to negative, that gives you a 12-volt bank. The challenge with that is it doesn't double your amp draw. So, what battery is best for you kind of depends on how long you're going to boondock and how long you need, how much power you need out of those batteries. The advantage of a 6-volt battery is that there's more plates, bigger plates. It will get more cycles over a period of time. So that means it'll last longer if you're taking care of it. Now, what you didn't ask here is between 6-volt flooded lead acid or 6-volt AGM batteries. And the challenge with flooded lead acid batteries is that they sulfate. As they drain down, sulfur attacks the plates. It gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And I would pretty much venture to say that your Born Free has a typical power center that is like this. This is a distribution center that has 120 volt coming into it. It has a converter that's part of it. It's an all-in-one system. This converter is what charges your batteries, whether they're 6 volt in series or the 12 volt. It's going to send 13.6 volts to that battery until it reaches 12.6. Then it's going to go to a float stage, which is 13.2. That doesn't break up the sulfation. And so, batteries that should last 5 to 6 years are lasting 2 to 3 years, whether they're 6 volt or 12 volt, because they're sulfating. So the thing then you have to look at between 6 and 12 is I can use one 12 volt battery. I don't have to get two of them. I use one 12 volt battery. I generally can't go much over 100. It's in the group 24, 27, 31. So all that means is how many amp hours they have. How long are you going to go before you need to recharge that battery? If you're dry camping, you can't hook up. Do I have solar panels? All that stuff kind of plays into effect in that. So if you're going to do some dry camping and you want to stay out a little longer, two 12 volt batteries hooked parallel, meaning positive to positive, negative to negative, will still give you 12 volt batteries, but then that will double the amp hour. So instead of 105 in a group 24, I have 210 amp hours. To do that with 6 volt, I have to get two more batteries. And I would say your Class C does not have enough room for 4 of those big 6 volt batteries in there. Now, the advantage of an AGM battery, which is absorbed glass mat, is that they're completely sealed and they aren't as prone to sulfation as the flooded lead acid batteries. In my opinion, if you're not going to do a lot of dry camping, I would go with the two 12 volt batteries. It'll give you, enough power to basically, spend a day or two dry camping. If you're going to go to Harvest Host, or you're going to go to, even just a Walmart parking lot or a rest stop overnight, as long as you don't have a residential refrigerator. And I think with a 2002, you probably don't. You're going to look more at an absorption refrigerator that does 120 volt if you're plugged in, or 12 volt, or LP with using a little bit of the 12 volt. Now, one of the things I would recommend is look on the site, and we have a download in some places, which reminds me, the download for today is the 50 state parks you can't miss on your next RV trip. So take a look at that up towards the top of it. But we have a chart on the site. We have videos on the site that kind of go through what those appliances, those components will draw on a 12 volt system. And, the biggest culprit is going to be a furnace, because that blower motor, even though it's running on LP, that blower motor is going to take a lot of battery power. If you have to run your refrigerator on 120 volt through an inverter through that, that's going to draw a lot of battery power. Your lights. So if you don't find it on the site, go to Go Power, is a company that makes solar panels, and now they're doing batteries as well. And if you go to gpelectric.com, they have a great calculator on there that will sit down, download that, and you look at it. And that's basically what we've got for our download here, is it will tell you those components. And then you have to decide, how long am I going to be using the lights? That's the challenge. There's no perfect science to this, because you really can't estimate how long you're going to have the lights on, how many times the refrigerator is going to cycle, because it depends on the ambient temperature outside. The furnace is going to depend on the temperature, your water pump, all that stuff. But at least it gets you started thinking about what you're going to use, how long you need it to last, and then what battery is best for you. Now, if you're going to be doing a lot of boondocking, I would say take a look at lithium. But then you've got a whole new set of issues. You can't just throw a lithium battery in with that old charger. It will not charge it up more than probably about 75%. So you're going to lose 25% of what you're paying for, which is going to be sometimes, in the 8 times more price point. So long answer to that, but you have to look at how they're being used. Like I say, the 6 volt battery, you see a lot of those being used in the bigger rigs that will do 2 sets of those 6 volt, because they'll just cycle about twice as many times as those 12 volt batteries will. So Joe says, and I think Joe's been here before, he's got 2005 Tiffin Allegro bus, and the main slide works sometimes. When switched, it depressed When the switch is depressed, it clicks in both positions, whether slide works or not. I believe it is electric. Seems to be a long round motor in the compartment under the slide. So 2005 Tiffin, you probably, I doubt if it's an electric motor and a Tiffin in the main slide, because that's a pretty big slide. And Tiffin generally has used power gear over the years. And which I get back to the power gear did have an electric version of that. So the first thing I tell everybody is, when you have a slide room situation that is clicking, it's not moving, it says, the first thing is the unit plugged in? Are your batteries providing enough power for that initial amp draw of those motors that are going in? Whether it's hydraulic or electric, it doesn't matter. There's still a motor that's going to push something. And so what generally happens is, you come to the campground, you put your jacks down, you want to run your slide rooms out, and then you go outside and you start hooking everything up. So you're doing it off the house batteries with no additional oomph from the converter. If your batteries are sulfated, and with a 2005 Tiffin, I'm pretty sure you're on about the 5th or 6th set of batteries, maybe not quite that bad, but they have been upgraded. And if they are not being maintained properly, like we talked about before, they're sulfated. And I've had people saying, oh, I know my batteries are good. Well, you don't know your batteries are good unless you put them on a charge, and you get them properly charged. You let them sit back, and then you put a 25 amp draw device on them and count the actual amp hours that it goes through. Nobody does that. So you get these meters that somebody puts on. Yeah, they look at 12.6. Oh, but they're full. As soon as you hit that switch, they drop like a lead balloon, and you get that clicking. The clicking usually means that you don't have enough power, and those motors go into kind of a lockout thing that just, so that not power enough to push them. I'm going to back up just a little bit before that as well. Are you leveling the coach and stabilizing it before you try to put the slide rooms out? So it could be a combination of several things. If you don't level that coach, you could have a twisted chassis, which means you have a twisted sidewall, which means now you're trying to push this box like a bad drawer in a dresser that just doesn't quite make it, and you don't have enough oomph out of that motor. And if you're not plugged in, especially then, it's not going to push that in. So level the coach and stabilize it first. Plug that unit in, see if that makes a difference. Then if it still just clicks like that, then you're going to have to go through the troubleshooting steps. Lippert owns Power Gear now, which again, I think is what your unit has. And go to lci1.com and go into their training session and find out exactly what you have. And it'll go through a series of steps for troubleshooting. So then you have to find out, do you have 12 volt going to that motor that's underneath there? Do you have anything that's impeding? I would also go outside and look underneath the rollers. Just make sure that the rollers haven't broken, or what's gliding across there. So all those restrictions can really add some friction to that unit that it's not designed to have. So those are the steps I would take to try and figure out what's happening. Bert says, Onan generator 2018 Winnebago Vista 29 VE. Was stopping intermittently a year ago, had a fuel pump replaced, and was fine until November, about 8 months. Has started quitting, sometimes runs at night, other times quits in 10 or 15 minutes. Seems to be more when ambient temperature is above 50 degrees. When it quits, the fuel pump is not running no matter how long you hold the stop button. When it cools down, fuel pump runs again. Is it likely that the genuine Onan fuel pump is failing again? Any other suggestions? Well, the first thing when you've got intermittent operation like that, I start to look at varnishing and, what type of additives. The generators are supposed to be run once a month for 30 minutes under about 75% load, 50 to 75%. Otherwise, that fuel in there will start to varnish, and your carburetor is going to get sludgy, and you're going to get issues with it. And and I call it gremlins because it just doesn't happen right away and do it every single time. It you know, like you say, the ambient temperature, when it gets above 50 degrees, then, you know, so I would look at putting in a little bit of sea foam. Onan has its own kind of fuel stabilizer product that you can run through it. I would look at replacing the fuel filter again. You know, it doesn't take much for those fuel filters with the kind of gas that we have available anymore to really be get plugged up pretty fast. And okay, so you did say you had the fuel pump replaced, and that was about a year ago. So I wouldn't think it's a fuel pump that quick doing that. But I mean, I guess the thing that you could do is if you disconnect the fuel line from the pump to the inlet to the filter and you're getting absolutely no gas going through it, it's the pump. More than likely, then it's getting hot, and there must be something. You know, I'm not sure what's actually in that fuel pump. I've never tore one apart, but if it's not pumping fuel, then it is that, and ambient temperature is probably causing that. But there are some things you can kind of walk through and just see if it's working with that. So Jerome says, I have a 95 Bounder 34J on a Ford chassis. The mid-90s Bounders are really very well built. And if they had even a bit of care in their life, they are worth keeping around. Okay. So, and it's kind of interesting because the Bounder really shaped the RV industry for quite a while. I remember when they came out somewhere in the probably 1987 time frame, 86, not exactly when it was, but it was the first basement. It wasn't the first one, but it was the first marketed basement unit out there that had storage underneath, kind of like a bus, and they just sold like hotcakes. I mean, they were selling 18% market share, and when I was working at Winnebago, we had 13% with absolutely everything we sold. So Bounder was just flying, and a lot of innovations. You know, a lot of great products. So, and you're right, but you do need to take care of any of the RVs. They're just like your home. You know, you got to check the sealants. You got to make sure that you know, you check the windows and the roof to sidewall and all that stuff. Ron Rogers has a 2013 Palomino truck camper, pop-up top with a toilet. Hopefully the toilet doesn't pop up. Not sure black water tank size, but how much water should I put in there for emergency use when traveling? So let me dissect this a little bit. You're not sure the black water tank size, but how much water should I put in there for emergency use when traveling? So I'm not sure where you're talking about. You know, are you talking the freshwater system? How much should you put in there for emergency use in your freshwater tank? You know, as far as the black water tank, I would put 2 or 3 gallons in it just to get the chemicals in there mixed up and so forth. And I think even the, you know, the Thetford Eco Toss, what's this other one? We got Campco. Both of these say add 1 packet through the toilet into a 40-gallon holding tank and add 1 gallon of water. The bio one here says to follow with 2 quarts of water. So, you know, I really don't think you need any water in the black water tank other than what would dissolve those, you know, we call it the good bugs. That's the treatment stuff in it. So, but, you know, I would say in your freshwater tank, you know, in case of emergency, it really depends on what kind of access you have to other water that's out there, because you can always go buy bottled water. And I say that, but yet, you know, we've got these floodings and disasters around the country that put a whole different perspective in it. You know, maybe half a tank of fresh water in the freshwater tank, because, you know, I don't like to keep it in there too long because it starts to get kind of scummy after a while, because it is hard water that you're putting in there. So, you know, if you're looking at the black water tank, again, a couple gallons in, it's all I would do. And you should be able to go get water from stores and places without the situation of emergencies. So Ginger says, the genset generator on a 2006 Road Trek 170 isn't turning over. The only thing I can't seem to change out is the air filter, which I can't find. I think it's been a while. I think it's obsolete. Do you have any questions? Well, if it's not turning over, it's not the air filter, because the air filter is just going to restrict airflow coming into that. It will still turn over, even if you have a plugged air filter. So if it's not turning over, then what you need to do is check for 12-volt power coming to that generator. So you should have a cable that comes from the battery or distribution center to that generator that is red, and it's got a red sleeve over the top of it, and it should have a little positive symbol on it, and then you should have another cable that goes to the base of your generator that has the negative. So just take a multimeter like you would find this one here. Make sure your battery is on. Make sure you go to the 12-volt DC setting on that, and put it on your battery first, wherever you have a Road Trek. So you got the smaller little Class C in there. So the batteries on that usually are either under the step well or off to that first compartment. Do I have deep cycle battery power there? Is it on? Do you have a battery disconnect switch? Make sure that's on. So make sure something inside's working. Your lights, whatever, that's telling you, yep, I got my disconnects on. I'm getting power into it. Then go to your generator and just check your voltage at the generator. My guess is that if it's not turning over, you're not getting 12 volt to that generator, and so it won't crank. Now, if you do have 12 volt to the generator, then you got something in your starter motor of your genset. But the air filter will not keep it from turning over. It might keep it from starting because it's not getting enough airflow in, but it shouldn't do that. The other thing, 170 with the genset, I'm not sure what kind of generator you have. Most of them are Onan. So if you can find the model number of that, you should be able to get the service manual for it, and it will tell you where that air cleaner is. So you should clean that. I mean, you should replace that. But normally there's just a cap that'll pull off close to the carburetor, because you got air coming into it, and be able to help you with that. All right. So we got 81. We have no more questions that have come up yet here. So I've got a couple new products. Here's something that I ran into. Everybody has problems with the decals on their units. They start to get cloudy, they crack, they fade. They do not recommend that you put any kind of wax over them, because that will just enhance it. They got to breathe a little bit. And there are different levels of quality. You've got the thicker vinyl that's used in them. The 3M makes most of the vinyls in it. So Sharpline's one of the predominant decal manufacturers or providers in the country. And so I called them and asked, what do you guys find how can you protect the decals on the side of this? Or if you're from Canada, decals. That's how they pronounce it up there, I guess. But anyway, they said that they have come across this product called Rejects, and it's the only product that they recommend putting on the decals, and it will extend the life of those decals about twice as long. In the trials that they have, all these manufacturers have these testing grounds where they put decals out, and what does it do to the sun? Because UV degradation, that's what's causing it. Now, some people like 303 protectant, but this Rejects product is one of the best that they have found. I have not had a chance to use it. I just got some with the cold weather here. I can't put it on yet, so I'm looking forward to this summer putting it on there. And the problem with testing something like that is sometimes it takes years before you can actually test it. So Ginger says, wow, thank you. Okay, well, hopefully you can trace those steps on that generator to see what's causing the problem with that. So there are a couple of other products here that I've run across, since we don't have questions yet. Now, when I was writing the RV handbook, one of the things I came across is all the chassis manufacturers and truck manufacturers recommend changing your brake fluid every 3 to 5 years. Now, I don't know of anybody that's ever done that, but what they're trying to get at is that your brake fluid can develop moisture. It can get condensation, and then it can be weak. This happens to be a brake liquid tester from Nico, I believe it is. Got it on Amazon, and what it will simply do is if you go in and test your brake fluid in it, it will tell you the different levels of that, and then you can just see, you push the back in, you push this in, and it will tell you what is acceptable and not acceptable. And again, I just got this on Amazon, and it's a great little tester just to make sure where you're at with your brake fluid. This is a product we just came across called Gas Stop, and normally your LP line will have a excess flow valve inside, which is kind of a spring-loaded valve, but it doesn't stop 100% of leaks inside an RV. And a Gas Stop will do that. It takes care of that extra 15%, and you can use it for your DOT cylinders on grills, on travel trailers. You can also use it for ASME tanks on motorhomes. What I also like about this is it is a actual leak tester as well. And Mike was showing me this, and actually I think it was one of the engineers, Bart, was saying that if you put this on, you open your gas valve and you push this reset button, that needle will go to the place where it tells you if you've got what kind of pressure is in there, and then you let it set for about an hour or more. Don't use anything in the inside, and if that needle has changed position, you have a leak in that system. So Gas Stop, great product to have. I think every RV should have one. We have Chuck that he says new to RVing. He's buying a 2022 Jayco North Point. Will need to get a better mattress. Yes, you will. Is there a maximum thickness of the mattress that I should not exceed? Any recommendations for a very good firm mattress? Yeah, Chuck, and that's one of the things in my RV buyer seminar, I tell people that, I'm amazed at what somebody will accept in an RV that they will never accept at home. And a mattress is the first one. I ask how many people have 2x2 piece of framework in the bedroom with some paneling around it and a 4x8 sheet of plywood and a hunk of foam. And you walk around the shows and the dealer lots, and you will not find a box spring in any of these RVs in there because you can't get them in. They don't bend. And so you've got a 4x8 sheet of plywood, basically, with a mattress on it, and half the mattresses on the market are foam that they put a cover on. They call them Deluxe Supreme. Nobody looks at the mattress. You would never accept that in your home, but you just assume I paid $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, and 2-3 nights later you go, oh, this is horrible. And it's a price point. It's one of those things that manufacturers aren't going to waste money in stuff that you're not looking at. And obviously you have, and that's great. But I want to put inner spring, I want to put pillow top, I may get a sleep number. So I just went $200, $400, $1,000 in a mattress. I didn't even realize that I had to upgrade. So that's an important thing to look at. I like the sleep numbers. I don't think there's a height, a thickness that you should not exceed other than the height that it gets from whatever your pedestal's at. You get a really thick mattress and it's hard to get in and out of that depending on your height and convenience. That's the only thing I would look at. I would look more at the type of mattress, interior, and what is comfortable for me to sleep on. And the memory foams are out there and stuff like that. I do like the sleep numbers, so that's what I would look at more. Also, and what kind of pedestal you have and the area around it. Keep in mind some of these mattresses, they call them queen mattresses, but there's like 8 different sizes of queens. They're 60 by 80. They're 62 by 74. It all depends on that size of that bedroom and how you can get around those corners. And if you're looking at a Jayco North Point, I don't know if that has a slide room in the bedroom, you know, that makes it easier to get a bigger mattress because you're moving it away so you can get around to it. But just look at what kind of walk around room, you know, and size, and measure what you got now. You'll be amazed at how many different sizes of queens. You know, in the residential market, a queen is pretty much standard in its size, and a fitted queen sheets will fit that perfectly. And they're all over the board with motorhomes. So 2014 Winnebago Via, when I start the engine, charge to the chassis battery is 14.2, but charge to the house battery is only 12.6. After driving for a while, the solenoid engages and now charges to the house is the same as the chassis. Is that normal to have that delay? And yes, it is. So what's happening is that you have an engine alternator that is going to charge the engine battery, and then it's going to go to what's called a battery isolation management solenoid, a BIM solenoid. And that solenoid is going to open and close according to what your house battery voltage is. When your house battery is fully charged, it's 12.6 volts. And so if you have a converter that you're plugged into a shoreline power and it's 12.6, that converter is only going to get to 13.2. It's kind of a float charge. A battery will not accept anything over 13.2. So when you're driving down the road, your engine battery is being used, your alternator is kicking in at 14.2, so it's charging the engine battery, but it realizes that your house battery is only 12.6, or is at 12.6. So it's charged. It doesn't want to keep charging it. It doesn't want to boil that battery, especially at 14.2. If it continuously did 14.2 on your lead acid batteries, then you would boil those batteries up pretty fast. So it shuts off to that battery. So now when you're driving down the road, some of the components in your RV, your battery starts to drain just a little bit. The engine alternator notices that, the solenoid opens up and allows you to charge those batteries. So that's basically how that system works. That BIM will also allow you to jumpstart your house batteries or your engine batteries with your house batteries with the switch on the dash. And so I think your Via has, it's either on the dash or, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on the dash on 2014. But it's just like jump starting from a house to that. So Rob, and where are we at for, so we got 10 minutes. Rob has a 2004 Fleetwood Prowler. I suspect my roof leak is coming from the air conditioner unit. How can I tell if this is possibly the leak source? And did he have, was Rob the one that had the skylight? Let me look here. I don't see it. Okay. So your roof air conditioner is going to have a foam gasket on the bottom side of it. And I'm not sure where, where the leak is coming at from the inside of it. You've got 2004 Fleetwood Prowler. So that is a travel trailer. So your roof air conditioner, and I'm pretty sure they use Dometic, but either Coleman or Dometic had the same thing. There's a foam gasket that's underneath that unit, and you have spring-loaded bolts on the inside that need to be torqued every year to be able to compress that gasket properly, because it will start to break down and it will get loose, and then you can get moisture that penetrates from the inside of it. What I would do if you've got, and it's a 2004, so if you feel pretty handy, I would go in and take a look at some of the videos that we've done on the roof air conditioners and the gaskets and so forth. Take those 4 bolts off, because that will come off very easily, and then you should be able to inspect that whole thing up there and put a new gasket. You don't want to use the old gasket, but it's really easy to install. You don't want to use silicone or butyl tape or anything like that, because you got to be able to drain that out of there. But by pulling that out, and you may be able to, before taking that step, maybe take the inside shroud off, and you should see that whole open area where you got your return air coming up and your back air coming in, the evaporator coils and so forth. But the really true telltale way to do it is basically take it off and inspect that area. That it's not that big a job. Sometimes it seems like it, but it's not. So David Tucker says, hi, David. I have a 2020 Jayco Red Hawk 24B. I'm on my third slide repair. I have a Schwintech room slide, 15.5 feet long. I'm very careful about being level. I drive my wife crazy. Me too. Twice I've had slide alignment problems. Both times it was the bottom left-hand corner. It would not go all the way in. I have a 6 100 amp hour Battle-Born battery, so it's got lithium batteries, plus 570 watts of solar panel, so I'm fully charged. I'm thinking of getting it replaced with a Vroom system. What has been your experience with Schwintech slides? And so I personally think Schwintech has gotten a very bad rap in the industry because people don't understand how they work and they don't synchronize the units. And kudos for you for leveling and getting the coach stabilized before you do it, because that's a big thing. So the way the Schwintech works, it's got 2 cylinder motors in the walls, and then it has a rack that comes down, and you got gears at the top, and you've got another jib, it's called, at the bottom with gears. And so that room slide, there's rollers underneath it, and so those top gears turn and it just pushes the room in and out. First thing is if you don't level the coach, you don't stabilize the coach, you get a twisting in it, and that jimmy jams the sidewall, and you get one side that's not aligning. Now, I don't think that's happening with yours, and I keep pointing to the computer, so sorry about that. I keep thinking like your rig's right here. But so what the system is designed to do is it is designed to just push the room. It's not designed to carry any weight whatsoever. And how you're supposed to use it is when you hit that switch and the room goes out and it hits flush with the wall, you keep the switch on until the motors stop on their own. And this is something that very few people ever do, that because they think they're going to burn the motor up, because they hear it going, they're like, oh my gosh, I gotta undo the switch. No, it has to synchronize those motors. So here's what happens. You've got a slide room that on one side is heavier than the other. You may have a couch on this one and some smaller stuff over here, or you've got compartments with things in. So when that room goes out, this one is working harder than this side. So once you stop when it hits the wall without synchronizing it, now it's out of sync. So then you do the same thing when it comes in. As soon as it touches the wall, you stop. You go out 5-6 times of that, and it starts to get out of synchronizing pretty bad, and then it starts to work harder, and it finally gets to the point where it doesn't work. You take it into the dealership, and the dealers are now trained that these things are no good, and they put new motors in them. And that's not the problem. The problem is we haven't synchronized that motor. And so I've seen people that have gone time after time after time, and they haven't fixed it until they realize that this is how it's supposed to work. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening with yours, but the other thing that could be is then you've got a roller at the bottom, and you've got jibs, and there's some lubrication that can go with those. And check the rollers underneath, make sure that room is literally gliding on those rollers, and then you're not putting any weight on the actual mechanism. So switching to the Vroom is a system very similar to what Schwintech is. It's just got a little beefier system. Lippert owns Schwintech now, and they have come in with a thin wall track slide that's a little beefier as well. But if you go through, and I would highly recommend that go to lci1.com and go to their learning library, and they have a complete technical guide on that Schwintech system. Go through that, and you'll understand the different components and the things that could cause some of the issues that you're seeing. But I really think that Schwintech has gotten a bad rap here, mostly because of owner use. Some of it is also manufacturers. I know for a fact that you give a manufacturer a product that they can only put a 400-pound room that is 14 feet long, and they'll put an 800-pound room that is 20 feet long in it. That's how they operate. They think that they can save money by going with a lesser system. So sometimes the room's too big for the mechanism. But I would say in a, you know, a 24B, that's probably not the case. And I'm pretty sure that if you go through those tutorials and you take a look at that and where to you know, to lubricate the jibs and the rollers and, you know, those certain components, I don't think you'll have a problem. And I've had many people I've walked through that thing with, and they have come back and said, since I started doing that, I've had zero problems with it. We got about 3 minutes left. We got a few. Ginger says, another problem on my 2006 road trek. Driving in hot weather, the floor heats quite a bit directly behind the driver's and passenger seat. Do you have some possible reason for why? Normally, your road trek is a Class C, and that's pretty much where your catalytic converter is at. And so you've got this hot exhaust that's coming through at 1200 degrees, and it may be 2006. You maybe have a catalytic converter that's starting to get a little bit blocked in there. So that'll get even more excess heat inside that. I have seen where some people will come in and you know, put like a heat shield between the catalytic converter and the flooring of it. It's also very possible that your floor has started to deteriorate a little bit, especially if you let that vehicle idle. I've seen this a lot on motorized, where you just let that unit run idling without driving down the road. That heat from that exhaust system just bakes that floor, and that styrofoam in there just literally, you know what happens to a styrofoam coffee cup when you apply some really intense heat to it? It just starts to shrink, and you know, the less insulation you have between those two, the more it'll get hot. But I'm pretty sure that's exactly where your catalytic converter is at. So I would check that out. What is the best way to clean sensors in the black and gray water tank? There's a couple of different products. You know, the sensors on your tank are going to be probes that go through. So you got a, you know, you've got a powered one here, and then a 1/3, 2/3 full probe, and you want to clean all that sidewall off so you don't get any crud or calcium arcing between those two. So Tank Blaster is a great product that Thetford has brought out. It's just simply a packet that you put in with the granules. You fill up the tank, you drive it around, you let it sit for a certain amount of time in the overnight, you know, with the full holding tanks. The other thing that I highly recommend is if you can get in and put in a black water flush system. And what that is, it's just basically a spigot that goes through that has a spinning cone on the end of it, and you put it as close to the probes as you can get, and you hook a garden hose up to that, one that's dedicated for your flush tank, because you know it's going to get kind of cruddy, and that literally spins and cleans all that off the probes. If you can't get to that, then you can get a flush wand. I have one up somewhere. I don't see it right now, but the flush wand you hook to a garden hose. You have to go through the toilet with that. It's not as easy. It's very difficult, sometimes a lot messier to get in there. So anyway, we are at 5 o'clock. Ernie has one more. He's got a Vista 23, just had it 1 year and used it very little. I hear there's a lot of problems with the loft bed motors or breaking the screws worn rod that operates it. Should the button stay pushed until it stops? Sync, like you mentioned with the slide out. And that one, I don't believe so. Your loft bed, you know, 2016, and I haven't heard of a lot of problems with those, but they have a little different mechanism in it, so I don't think you should with that. But what I would recommend is to contact Winnebago's owner relations department and just ask them if there's a procedure for that they would recommend, and I'll check into it too, but I think it's totally different. With that, gaskets for an Atwood rear tip-out windows. Any suggestions with the 2004 Mini Winnie? And it depends on, I think your Mini Winnie, I would contact Winnebago. They made the windows, I believe, still up into 2004 in their aluminum extrusion department. It could be hair windows, but they made them up to a certain point in time. So they may be able to get it. But if you're looking for the gaskets for the between the window and the sidewall, that's butyl tape. That's not a gasket. It's a kind of a putty tape that looks like a gasket. So if you're looking to take the window out and replace it, use putty tape in there, and that will seal that window. So with that, appreciate everybody coming out. Ginger said thank you. I thank everybody that joined us and the questions that came in finally, so I didn't have to make up my own. And we will be back next month again, and look for some new videos. We just did a whole series on boondocking and connectivity that will come out as classes, and then we're going to be shooting some more content stuff here as soon as the weather gets nice enough to do that. So with that, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it, and have a good rest of the week. And hopefully we'll get some good weather. You guys can get those units out and start camping.